is getting hot down in South Carolina, not because of the weather, but that so-called double murder trial of the century, with some tense testimony on what could be the last day of witnesses in the case of Alex Murdaugh. This case is so important in that state that South Carolina's top lawyer came on down to question an expert witness. We're going to take you inside the courtroom ahead of this big field trip the jury's going to take. Plus, here in Washington, the Senate is demanding the head of the Norfolk Southern Railroad come answer questions on Capitol Hill, with the EPA back on the ground in Ohio. What we're hearing now about how long the cleanup in East Palestine will take. And Tennessee's governor wants to ban drag shows in public there, as a newly uncovered photo appears to show him dressed in drag in high school. What his office is saying about that, and the pushback from LGBTQ+ advocates accusing him of trying to criminalize an art form. And more controversy for Commanders owner Dan Snyder, why he's giving a proverbial middle finger to his fellow NFL owners, as his former partners reportedly say he used the NFL team as his personal piggy bank. We've got all that coming up in just a bit. Hey, I'm Hallie, and in just the last few minutes, like really as we were walking to the studio here, the state rested its rebuttal case after some super tense testimony on what's looking like the last day of witnesses in the double murder trial of Alex Murdaugh. The next stop, a kind of field trip for the jurors to the crime scene, an up-close look at the place they've heard about a ton over the last 6 weeks, the family's hunting estate and the kennels. You see some of those shots here, where Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, were killed in June of 2021. But before then, jurors got treated to, honestly, a kind of testy day of questioning, with the state bringing back some witnesses to try to counter the defense's case. And you want to talk about how important this case is in this state? Look at the screen. You're about to see it here. The guy holding the gun in this dramatic reenactment, that is the South Carolina Attorney General, the state's top prosecutor, questioning the witness. He's going after the defense's theory of the crime, with the prosecution's witness dismissing the defense expert's witness and their ideas about how tall the shooter could have been. Listen to this.
What did you find odd about the theory, first of all?
I think the theory is preposterous, in my opinion.
The other thing the prosecution wanted to do today, they wanted to get after Murdaugh's credibility. You're looking here at one of his former law partners. Remember, Murdaugh is a disbarred attorney. And this former law partner called Murdaugh a theatrical presence in the courtroom. The defense accused him of lying because Murdaugh stole from him, and that's where things got touchy.
I would take high offense with that, Mr. Hartpootlian.
I'm concerned about your high offense. Are you angry at him for stealing your money?
I have no feeling one way or the other.
I don't have any feeling about Alex Murdaugh betraying you and stealing your money. I admire you. I don't know that I could look beyond that.
Objection, Your Honor.
Allison Barber has been watching it all. She is there outside the courthouse for us in Walterboro. So let's talk about these sort of strategies that the prosecution has in these closing days of this trial. First, on Murdaugh's credibility, right? They want to show that he is not a credible presence here. And we actually did get some new information that showed Alex Murdaugh may have lied just last week on the stand, right?
Yeah, so if you think back to Alex Murdaugh's testimony, which there is a lot to process within that, the biggest moment, without a doubt, was when he admitted that he had lied about being at the kennels that night and acknowledged that it was his voice in what has been referred to as the Snapchat kennel video. In his explanation for why he said he lied that night and why he said he kept lying until he took the stand 20 months after the first time he told prosecutors and investigators at the scene that he was not at all at the kennels around the time Paul and Maggie were, when he'd said he'd stayed at the house, he explained that lie by saying, I was paranoid because I was using drugs and I also had a general distrust of law enforcement. So to sort of counter that, the prosecution brought up some of his past behaviors to suggest, hey, you actually had a pretty good relationship with law enforcement. They said you carried a badge that identified you as a solicitor. You also had blue lights installed in your car. How were you able to get those blue lights installed? And Alex Murdaugh claimed that he had permission from the sheriff in Hampton County himself, as well as other sheriffs within that department. We heard today from the former sheriff of Hampton County, T.C. Smalls, and he said that's not true. Listen.
I never had a conversation with Alex Murdaugh. Matter of fact, I never had a conversation with anyone in my 39 years about installing blue lights in their personal vehicle.
That's not something that's done, is it, sir?
Oh, no, no.
I mean, look, the prosecution has been saying and continues to try to make the case that this is a person who lies any chance he gets and that he doesn't care how it impacts other people or who he is telling a lie to, whether that's his friends, his family, or law enforcement. Hallie.
The other piece of this, Ellison, is that the prosecution wants to get at something that the defense laid out just recently, the idea that there could have been a second shooter, the so-called two-shooter theory. That's where the state's lead pathologist is coming back with some sharp words there. Talk us through it.
Yeah, right. So one of the big pieces of the argument there, and forgive the noise behind us, we're right off of a main road here, but part of the argument that the defense's pathologist used to say he thought there was a two-shooter theory was really just going in and trying to disagree with almost every aspect of the state's pathologist's original findings in the original autopsy report. And one of the big points of contention yesterday and then again today was the gunshot wound on Paul Murdaugh's head. You had the defense pathologist saying that they believed that was a contact wound, which would mean a shooter was in a different position than the state has said. And the defense, they have said if that was the position someone was in, if the shooter was in the feed room, that it probably couldn't have been our guy because he's too big to be in there. What we heard today was the state pathologist coming back and saying she stands by her findings that the gunshot wound on Paul Murdaugh's head was an exit wound, not a contact wound. And she really explained how if it were to be some sort of contact wound where the gun is to the back of his head, kind of skin to barrel, if you will, that the damage to the head would have been so much more severe. And there's this really compelling moment, Hallie, where she looked at the jury and she said, I know what you have seen is awful, but I'm telling you, if he'd been shot in this way, as the defense is claiming, it would have been much more horrific. The damage to his face, his head, it would have been far more than what they've seen. Hallie.
Before we let you go, can you just give us a quick preview of that field trip? We are not going to get to see it until after the jurors are done, right? Let's be clear about that and set some expectations for tomorrow here, but walk us through how this is going to work.
Right, so we expect that it's going to take tomorrow. I'm keeping an eye still in the courtroom in case there's any sort of update from the judge. But speaking with some officials here at the courthouse earlier today, one person told us they expect the jury to go there. The defense has said it'll be a 45-minute drive, about an hour there, 45 minutes back. But the court official we spoke to today said that they do not expect Alex Murdaugh to go with the jury. They say that he will stay in holding, either in a holding cell in the basement here at the courthouse or back at the Colleton County Jail. Hallie.
Ellison Barber live for us there in Walterboro, South Carolina. I am sure we'll talk again tomorrow at this time. Ellison, thank you so much. So listen, some pretty bananas weather out there right now. You've got the West Coast and East Coast slammed with the same kind of winter conditions. Some 13 million people under weather alerts as we speak. Lots of snow, lots of rain, lots of wind. And while this round of weather's new for the East, you've got California still recovering from the last storm, with a lot of roads still closed and covered in snow, as you can see. Blizzard warnings for the mountains. Look at this in Beverly Hills. People had to be evacuated after that retaining wall collapsed and triggered that mudslide that you're seeing right there. Out in the Northeast, some spots are going to see up to 8 inches of snow. For New York City, it's been the first real snow of the season. Not like a massive amount of snow, but snow, period, and late, too, the last day of February after a warm streak. Look at these flowers already starting to bloom in Central Park. That tells you a lot in that visual right there. Vaughn Hilliard is in it in New York City. It is the first real snowfall, technically, which is worth noting. It was not like some humongous situation, but it was interesting that it came so late for New York.
Right, and I mean, there's daffodils just over here to my right. We were watching them. They're trying to creep up. They're trying to pop open, but the snow, even though it's just a little bit, it came down here overnight. And when we're talking about New York City here, we're talking about an inch and a half of snow, Hallie, but that is the most sizable amount of snow that New York City has seen all winter long. We're talking about 2 inches over the course of an entire winter. That is not normal here in New York City. I was talking with Ina, the Shima Ibu dog. She's a 10-month-old puppy, and I was talking with her father, and he was telling me that the dog, she thought they were going to have the chance to go out and frolic a little bit out in the snow, but so far for his puppy's first winter, that has not been able to take place. Instead, you have watched rain come down, slush come down. Even in Boston here today, a lack of sizable amount of snowfall come down. Our friends in Maine, we should note, are getting several inches of snow here as we speak, but largely this was a storm that did not hit hard. Here's the winter wanes, Hallie.
We talked about the East, Vaughn. Let's talk about the West, because California is still digging out from snow. You have people down south still cleaning up from tornadoes. They're trying to get power back on. Like, this is something where, yes, the storms are moving through, more to come later in the week, and some folks can't catch a break.
No, there's more than 130,000 folks in Michigan that still do not have power after 6 days since the last storm hit them. Folks in Oklahoma are still cleaning up from nearly a dozen tornadoes that struck over the course of the weekend. Up to a foot of snow is expected to come down over the course of the next 48 hours in the San Bernardino County mountain region there, just outside of Los Angeles. In the greater L.A. area, you're still facing a good amount of rain in the forecast, as well as up to 60 miles per hour of wind gusts. There is still a lot at play, and our friends in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, they're also facing up to a foot of snow over the next 48 hours ahead, Hallie, as well.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us there in New York. Hat and gloves. You may not need them for too much longer, Vaughn. Thank you, sir. The Supreme Court here in Washington seeming pretty skeptical today of the Biden administration's plan to wipe out billions of dollars in student loan debt. Chief Justice John Roberts telling the administration's top lawyer maybe the president shouldn't have gotten involved. Listen.
I think most casual observers would say if you're going to give up that much amount of money, if you're going to affect the obligations of that many Americans on a subject that's of great controversy, they would think that's something for Congress to act on.
And that is the big question here with these two cases that the justices heard about, right? Does the president even have the power to cancel all of this student loan debt? Whether he does or not could be huge for a lot of people. We're talking about a program estimated to cost some $400 billion over the next 30 years. It has the potential to help 40 million Americans who are having a tough time paying off student loans. The administration says without that help, way more people will probably default on those loans. And here in D.C., it was really apparent just how big of a deal this is for people. Hundreds of folks showing up to rally in support of student loan forgiveness.
Debt is something that is going to weigh us down and not let us, prosper in life as we continue.
There are young people who simply don't have either the generational wealth, don't have the means, don't have the resources to pay their college in full, debt-free.
Yamiche Alcindor is joining us now. Okay, so Yamiche, we heard a little bit from the justices there. It was funny to hear Chief Justice John Roberts say, to the casual observer, it seems like the Supreme Court is not a casual observer, right? They're in it. They're in this. Read the tea leaves for us, because the skepticism was apparent, I think.
Well, skepticism is the right word to be using, because conservative justices today sounded like they were really questioning whether or not President Biden has the ability to launch this program and to have this program relieve so much, billions, as you said, of dollars of student loan relief. You did hear some liberal justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson and others, asking about the standing and whether or not these 6 GOP-led states, as well as these 2 borrowers, whether or not they can actually have the standing to bring this before the court, meaning are they the right people to even bring this case? So there's an issue here about whether or not this case could go in the favor of the Biden administration. But just in talking to experts and in reading the tea leaves, this conservative majority court, they seem like they were leaning toward saying that this program should not have been something that was the president and instead should have been Congress.
This is there's a lot here, right? Because, and we're not going to know probably till June. This feels like a June case or whatever, months from now that we're going to know how the justices will decide. But it affects not just a lot of people in the ways that we laid out in that introduction, but it's a real test on the limits of presidential power. Like, there's actually a lot riding on this for future presidents down the road.
Certainly. And I mean, when you look at these two cases, because they are separate cases, you have the Biden v. Nebraska case, you have the Department of Justice v. Brown case. Both of those cases really come down to, did President Biden follow the right procedures? Does he have the power to do this? And I was outside talking to a number of people who are out protesting. As you said, the loudest voices today were the people who are in favor of this. I talked to a number of people, including two women who actually slept outside the Supreme Court trying to get in, as well as telling me how critical they see this issue. So let's take a listen to what they told me.
A lot of students across the country can't even afford housing or food while they're in school. And then when they graduate, they're tackled with thousands to sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt.
It just means that there's more money on the table for my family. There's more money for my siblings. There's more money for them to go to college.
So you heard it, Hallie. Really, a lot of people saying this is getting to the heart of whether or not I can live this American dream that we say we have in this country, because student loan debt affects so many people. As you said, this could impact, according to the White House's data, 40 million people. That's in addition to 26 million people who immediately applied and who are waiting in limbo to see if this program ends up not stalled, Hallie.
We're going to see what the justices say in a few months from now. Yamiche, thank you very much. It's great to see you. Appreciate it. The head of the EPA is back in East Palestine, Ohio today, explaining more about how he wants to hold the train company accountable for that toxic derailment. But here's the thing. Still no answer yet, right? Still no idea yet of how long cleaning all this up is going to take. Also still a question of whether or if President Biden plans to visit. Listen.
You know, I don't know. That's the $60,000 question. I can tell you that he has been laser focused on this from the very beginning.
Michael Regan's trip today comes as the EPA is just saying in the last 40 minutes, they're rolling out a new mobile lab bus that can monitor the air as they're trying to get some of this toxic waste out. Ron Allen has been all over this story since the beginning. He's joining us now. Kind of a revolving door of folks like Regan coming in and out of East Palestine here as focus remains on this toxic train derailment cleanup. I might have put the words in the wrong order, but you know what I mean. There's all this toxic stuff that came from that derailment. They got to fix it. Question is, how long is that going to take? And we still don't have an answer tonight.
And it appears the EPA doesn't have a plan yet from Norfolk Southern. That was part of the administrative action that they took against Norfolk Southern a week or so ago. They have to produce a detailed plan about how they're going to do it. So, no, we don't have a hard time frame. We do know that part of the process of removing the contaminated soil involves removing some of the train track that's there. And that process, Norfolk Southern hinted, would take at least a couple of weeks to do that part of it. Now, how much time it will take to do the rest of it remains uncertain. But one thing that the EPA administrator again made clear is that the train company is going to be held accountable for all this. Here's some of what he had to say about that. Take a listen.
Until we are satisfied, we're going to continue to hold their feet to the fire and stress that the taxpayers will not foot the bill, Norfolk Southern will.
And that is the message again and again that the EPA and other federal officials continue to deliver to try and reassure the community there. But as Mr. Regan himself pointed out, there is a huge trust deficit. And that is at the heart of the problem there. Officials continue to say that air, water tests come back showing no problems. The air and the environment is safe, but residents still just don't believe it. They're doing their own testing. In some cases, they filed lawsuits, and they have scientists doing their own testing, and people just feel uneasy about it. And that is not going to end for some time, it would seem. So the process of cleanup continues. They have identified 4 locations in Ohio where they are going to be taking this contaminated waste material. That was an issue. That seems to have been resolved today, and this continues. And I'm sure that Mr. Regan and others will be back. The state will be there. There are now going to be, there's a call for the head of Norfolk Southern, the CEO, Alan Shaw, to appear before a Senate committee in Washington to answer questions about all this. And there are state-level committees also conducting investigations in Pennsylvania and Ohio. There may be subpoenas issued. So this is a long process that's going to continue for some time. And meanwhile, the residents there, some are just very anxious and uneasy about not just their own health, but the health of their community.
A lot of eyeballs are going to remain on that story for a long time, Ron, including, I know, yours. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's talk about TikTok, because Congress they're looking at a bill right now that could ban TikTok. And if you're like, okay, do they want to ban it altogether in this country? Yeah, some of them do. And if you're like, okay, are they actually going to ban TikTok altogether in this country? That is still a very open question here, because what we found out in the last couple of minutes here is that there's this House committee that is looking to greenlight a bill that would empower President Biden to basically be able to make that move. Listen to some of the back and forth.
TikTok is a modern-day Trojan horse of the CCP used to surveil and exploit Americans' personal information. It's a spy balloon in your phone.
All right, so this is what a House committee is talking about, but it doesn't mean that a ban on TikTok is going to become law. Not even close. Because let's be real here. We don't know if this thing is actually going to make its way through Congress. You're looking at a committee. That's like step pre-1 of all the steps it has to go through. Here's what we do know. The government-owned phones are not allowed to have TikTok. And that ban is starting to kick in. It affects federal agencies, Think the military, NASA, the National Park Service. They all have 29 days from today to make sure that the app gets off the phones, again, the government-owned phones of 4 million federal workers. Remember why this TikTok pushback is all happening in the first place. TikTok is owned by a Chinese parent company, ByteDance. The Chinese government, in turn, owns a stake in ByteDance. That is raising concerns about Chinese access to Americans' data. TikTok, for its part, calls the possible bans little more than political theater. Garrett Haake is on Capitol Hill, where this is all going down. He's joining us now. So, Garrett, what is so interesting? First of all, bring us up to speed on this House committee. At last I heard, as I was walking into the studio, they were still debating. Like, did they vote to get it to step 2, basically, or is it still held up on step 1?
I think this particular bill is going to be held up on step 1, Hallie. It sounds like it's going to be postponed.
Okay, fine. So good to know on that. That said, obviously the conversation is happening. And my question to you is, like, we know what the pro-TikTok constituency is in the country. It's like my friends who love TikTok, probably yours, any Gen Z person who you love in your life, 100 million people in this country who use it. But what is the pro-TikTok constituency for lawmakers? Like, who's going to bat saying, no, let's keep TikTok, like, we don't want to ban it?
Yeah, Hallie, I don't know that TikTok has a lot of friends on Capitol Hill. It seems to have only degrees of opponents, degrees of enemies right now. On the one hand, you've got folks like Mike McCall there who see it as a significant national security threat, a spy balloon in your phone, as he described it. On the other hand, you've got a number of Democrats who are worried about what the algorithm is serving up to teenagers, what it is putting in front of children, what it is doing in terms of monitoring, not for kind of a Chinese perspective, but just the kinds of content it's pushing in front of teenagers who worry about privacy and who worry about the way that the algorithm is manipulating young, impressionable minds. There's not a lot of love left for TikTok. You mentioned the federal bans. Really, this has kind of all been moving in one direction since just the end of last year. What you do see, though, are some Democrats, primarily Democrats, saying, let's at least slow roll how we approach this. At least that's what Gregory Meeks, the top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, had to say earlier today. Take a listen.
I believe concerns about TikTok by the United States government and our allies are justified. We cannot act rashly without consideration of the very real soft power, free speech, and economic consequences of a ban.
So a lot to juggle there, Hallie, and I just have to point out the politics of this are interesting, too, because the bill that we're talking about here, McCall's bill, which is one of several different ideas of how to approach TikTok here, is interesting because here you've got a House Republican saying not that he wants to ban TikTok, but he wants to give President Biden the ability to ban TikTok. So the person who all your friends and my friends would get mad at if and when that decision is made isn't those House Republicans. They could say, look, we just gave the tools. It was your Democratic president who decided to pull the plug on this thing, if that's the direction this goes.
Well, right, if that ends up actually happening. And again, we're not trying to, like, freak people out. I'm not trying to get up here on TV and be like, they're banning TikTok. They might, right? Like, that might be ultimately what happens, but we don't know. We can't say that yet. What's also interesting is it's not like these concerns about TikTok are new. The executive branch, right, meaning federal regulatory agencies, have been negotiating with TikTok for years over how to keep the app functioning. Has this sort of bigger spotlight on Congress derailed those negotiations? Like, what do we know about what's happening there?
It's hard to say. I mean, it doesn't seem like they've derailed it, but there's been not much significant progress. I mean, we've not been able to come on the air and report any movement on this for quite some time, and this goes back to the Trump administration. There was this idea of something called Project Texas, a great nickname if you ask me, to kind of onshore TikTok's operation, to try to move everything about U.S. data into U.S.-based servers and put a company like Oracle, a big American technology company, in charge of handling that data, take it out of ByteDance, the Chinese company's hands. That, I don't want to say it's fallen through, but it doesn't seem to have made much movement. And I know we're saying that this isn't imminent from this Congress, but I got to tell you, Hallie, Congress has moved much faster on this issue than I am used to seeing. The idea that the ban on government phones kind of slipped into that giant omnibus, that kind of everything spending bill late last year, caught a lot of people, including myself, by surprise. It was kind of a fringe idea until, bam, it was attached to a much-passed bill. So I wouldn't count on this being slow-moving forever.
Garrett Haake, great context, great reporting. Thank you very much, live for us on the Hill. That ties into what's coming up here on the show. You heard that member of Congress say, forget about spy balloons, look at TikTok. This new report is saying, forget about TikTok or the spy balloons. We should be looking at China-linked hackers. We'll talk about who they're allegedly going after later this hour. Plus, What we're learning from a newly unsealed search warrant in those University of Idaho murders, that's coming up. So now we know how Fox News and Dominion voting systems are reacting to that bombshell deposition from Rupert Murdoch. That was breaking news here on this show 24 hours ago. Remember, this is part of a $1.5 billion lawsuit filed by Dominion against Fox, accusing the network of intentionally spreading former President Trump's election fraud lies. The big question today, are there broader First Amendment issues at play here? Meaning, like, how could this case affect freedom of the press? Dominion, for its part, says it strongly believes in the First Amendment, but that law does not shield broadcasters who, quote, knowingly or recklessly spread lies. Now, Fox says the case violates the First Amendment, accusing Dominion of publicly smearing the company for commenting on allegations by then-President Trump and some of his supporters that, again, we know are lies. And remember, Murdoch, who called himself, his words, a journalist at heart in this filing, he's acknowledging that he let those lies spread. Stephanie Gosk is following this story. And what's so interesting here, Steph, is you've been talking with legal experts today about not just this case itself, which, let's be real, can get kind of weedsy with some of the back and forth. I think we've laid out big picture there. But pulling back, looking more broadly, broader, maybe call it the chilling effect or not, that the deposition might have on this case.
Well, it's interesting. First, what I would say, Hallie, is that it looks like this is going to a trial with a jury on April 17th. And that means all these people that we've been talking about, including those Fox News cable hosts, could be taking the stand, as well as Rupert Murdoch. And I spoke with one legal analyst today who said what's interesting about this particular case is that it's not just a moment-in-time defamation. It's not looking at one particular instance necessarily. It is looking at a span of time, weeks and months, where these, what we now know are lies, were being told on Fox Air. However, these same lies were also being broadcast on a lot of networks, including this one. And the question will be, what was the context in which they were presented, and what responsibility did Fox News have to put it in that context? And what did not only the hosts, but their producers, their executive producers, and management know about the veracity of the claims being made?
News organizations have a lot of protection here based on a 60-year-old Supreme Court case showing that people or groups like Dominion suing for libel have to prove actual malice. There is even some speculation that, like, there would never be a case that meets that bar of actual malice, meaning that Fox knew or should have known that what the on-air people were saying was not true. How does that factor in here?
Well, it's important. And the reason there are such freedoms is that it allows the press to do its job and not be constantly held responsible for everything that's said on its broadcasts or in its papers. However, there is some level of responsibility. And where do you draw that line? What should they know? What should they have known? There are at least some acknowledgement by Murdoch himself that what was being said by Trump and his acolytes was simply just not true, but yet it was continued to be reported on their broadcast. Should they have stepped in? The legal analyst that I spoke to said that perhaps what stands out the most is that they didn't exert more pressure. We also have this comment from NBC News legal analyst on what's been revealed in this deposition.
He's conceding that the Fox News hosts endorsed the claims that the Dominion election results were false. Yet that they knew in the back rooms and in their internal communications, they knew that those claims were false.
So then it goes back to that question of malice. Does that demonstrate malice? And that will be the argument back and forth in what looks to be a court battle with a jury ultimately deciding, Hallie.
Stephanie Gosk, I know you're all about the ins and outs of this case. There's a lot to it, but it's fascinating. Thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Italian police have arrested 3 people who they believe trafficked more than 100 migrants on a wooden boat that broke up on rocks in the Mediterranean this weekend, killing at least 65 people, including 14 children. Dozens of people are still missing. Police say they're also looking for a 4th suspect. Number 2. Nigeria's opposition is demanding a re-vote in that country's presidential election. So far, it looks like an early lead for the ruling party. The 2 runners-up released a joint statement calling the election results doctored and manipulated. Number 3, newly unsealed court documents reveal now what law enforcement took from a Pennsylvania home where they arrested the suspect in that Idaho murders case. The FBI took things like medical-style gloves, a flashlight, dark clothing. Still not clear why or how those things are significant to this case yet, but you'll remember the suspect was arrested 2 months ago at his parents' house. Number 4, around 30 million Americans are going to lose their extra food stamp benefits stemming from the pandemic tomorrow. The federal government's SNAP program, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, right? SNAP benefits, they're going to go back to normal levels, which are based on how much money a household makes per year on average. That means that for the average person getting those benefits, they're going to lose like $90 a month. Some of them may lose like $250 a month toward food expenses. More on that in the days to come. Number 5, the moon may be getting its own time zone, according to the European Space Agency. It's arguing that a universal method to keep time on and around the moon would be helpful as people go to build moon bases. The only issue, clocks actually run about 56 microseconds faster on the moon than on Earth. There's not even an agreed upon way to tell time when you're up there. So they might need to be starting at square one instead of square time zone. Let's talk about what's happening in Tennessee with a bill there that would make drag shows in public and in front of kids illegal. It is only steps away from becoming law. The state's governor, Bill Lee, says he'll sign it when it gets to his desk. But he's saying that at the same time that a supposed picture of him, seemingly dressed in drag himself, has started going around. This is the photo. Somebody on Reddit posted it from a 1977 high school yearbook, purporting to show the governor apparently in a skirt, a wig, and a necklace. Again, allegedly the governor. It's most likely part of a powder puff football game where kids dress as the opposite gender. The governor's press secretary has not confirmed whether the picture is actually of Lee, but says that any attempt to, in their words, conflate this serious issue with lighthearted school traditions is dishonest and disrespectful. Drag performers and critics of this Tennessee bill are calling out what they see as the sort of irony in this, saying there's a hypocrisy to wanting to criminalize something that the LGBTQ plus community views as an art form, but then being okay with it in the context of like a lighthearted tradition. Rahima Ellis is joining us now. The governor was asked about this Rahima picture. And he said something fairly similar to this statement, right? It's also not the first time that a yearbook picture of him has made the national news.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. He basically said that it was ridiculous, and he responded, even it was put up on Twitter, a response that he had with someone asking him about this, and he said, there is a difference, and I want to read this to make sure I get it right. He says, there's a difference between a photo of a man dressed as a girl as part of a school spoof and overly sexualized entertainment. He says that that is something that is very different. Again, as you point out, the governor's office is not confirming that it's actually him in that photograph, but according to reports we've read that the high school principal said in the high school yearbook, that's pictured. That is a picture of the governor. And it's not the first time that the governor has been seen doing something that's added some controversy and they ended up having to apologize for. He was photographed in a picture of him in a Confederate uniform. That was in 2019, and he ended up apologizing for that. Hallie?
There's been a lot of attention on this bill that's moving forward in Tennessee. Others like it in other states as well. Activists for the LGBTQ plus community say broadly it paints all drag as obscene, as sexualized.
Yeah, it's right. And some are objecting, saying, and you pointed this out earlier, that they're saying that it's okay for the governor to do this as entertainment, but not for anyone else. And that particularly not for the gay community. It's not right for them to do it. And that he is criminalizing this by making this distinction. The governor's bill, we should point out, says something that is in difference to that. And we've got a full screen. I want to show you what the bill actually says. The bill bans male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest or a sexual interest from performing in public or in front of children. It would not necessarily apply to all cross-dressing. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, thanks for being on top of that story for us. We will follow it for sure. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, it is Election Day in Chicago. It is turning into election night there. And we may know if the country's third biggest city could get a new leader, why it may be a shocking upset, and why she may be headed for defeat. Plus, what these California teenagers are building that they hope will break a world record. It's a cheesy story later on. In just a few hours, we could end up seeing something really surprising in the mayor's race in the country's third biggest city. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot may not even make a runoff in a crowded, tight race. Polls show her right in the middle of the pack against a whole bunch of opponents. And just to give you a sense of how much of a reversal this is, when she won in 2019, she won every single ward in the city. Now she is maybe not even top 2. And here's the deal. If nobody gets 50% of the vote and she is not in the top 2, she may not even get to the runoff in April. NBC's Marissa Parra joins us now from Chicago. And what we find so fascinating about this story, Marissa, is because I can hear people being like, Hallie, you anchor a national news program. Why are we talking about Chicago's mayor? It's because it's a microcosm of what a lot of big cities around the country are dealing with. And that is the issue of crime on the minds of people who live in those urban centers, right? And so there is a lesson, or at least a story that is so fascinating about Lori Lightfoot and her race here.
Absolutely. And also, you got to remember, this is the third largest city, a Democratic mayor in one of the largest cities in the country. After we've seen so many changes in the world and in the country in recent years, you have to remember it's been about 4 years since she was elected. So much has changed in the last 4 years. I mean, we had the COVID-19 pandemic that changed lives, it changed livelihoods, businesses, the economy. You got to imagine all of the things that have happened since then, not just since the pandemic, but when it comes to crime, as you just mentioned, especially here in Chicago. I was living here as we saw a spike in crime, carjackings, gun violence, and of course, you know, just overall homicides in general. There was a lot of changes when it comes to that. And then there was a lot of discussions on policing and what kinds of changes, if any changes, should be made when it comes to that. So, Hallie, I think this will be an interesting test to see how she fares in the wake of all of those changes in the last 4 years.
Our crack team over at First Read, our political unit here for NBC, are looking at the state of the nation's mayors more broadly, right? And these races more broadly. And they write that recent elections have been awesome for governors who were able to use federal COVID money to make them look good. Mayors have not been able to benefit in the same way. How does that impact not just this race, but others in the country?
Well, this really is a big test. When you look at other big cities across the country, I mean, you had New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, their mayors were not up for re-election. They didn't seek re-election like what we're seeing with Mayor Lightfoot. So I think this is going to be the first major test to see how voting patterns have changed or were impacted after something like this. And just boots on the ground here, Hallie, is something that I have found very interesting. We've spoken to a number of people who did vote for Lori Lightfoot in 2019, who said they just don't have that same support for her. And we'll have to see what the results are when they eventually come in.
I was going to say, we'll know soon. Marissa Parra, thank you very much. Appreciate you being there for us. Let's get to some breaking news that is just coming into us in the last couple of minutes here. The head of the FBI, in a brand new interview, is saying the agency thinks COVID may have originated, right, may have started with a lab leak in Wuhan, China. This is in an interview on Fox News. We want to play you some of the back and forth here. Watch.
As you note, Brett, the FBI has for quite some time now assessed that the origins of the pandemic are most likely a potential lab incident in Wuhan. I should add that our work related to this continues. I will just make the observation that the Chinese government seems to me has been doing its best to try to thwart and obfuscate the work here, the work that we're doing, the work that our U.S. government and close foreign partners are doing.
Ken Delanian is joining us now with that interview with Chris Wray over on Fox. So interesting here because this is really the first sort of big-time official that we're hearing talking about what we've been talking about for 4 days now, which is this mystery of where did COVID come from, and was it, as there is some leaked reporting based on some intelligence reporting you've done, suggest was it a lab leak from China? So put this into perspective.
Right, and this is the first time that anyone at the FBI has acknowledged this long-standing position that the FBI has taken since October 2021, that they believe with moderate confidence that it was a lab leak. But important perspective here, they are one of 8 intelligence agencies that have looked at this, and 4 believe the other way.
That's what's so interesting.
Yeah.
The intel agencies don't agree.
Yeah, they don't. And the CIA is one of 2 now that are undecided. They're so divided they couldn't come to a conclusion even to write it up. And then the Energy Department, as we've been reporting, has now weighed in and said, we believe with low confidence that it was a lab leak. What this tells you...
FBI, DOE say, yeah, lab leak. CIA says TBD, we're undecided. 4 others say... wasn't a lab leak.
And so the most important thing this tells you is the intelligence is bad. It's spotty. They don't have good information. They're groping in the dark here.
But yet Chris Wray's going on national TV to talk about it.
That's
Ken.
quite
What are we
remarkable.
supposed to how do we read that?
That's quite remarkable. I mean, because there's been a lot of good reporting about this, investigative reporting, and there's a compelling case for a lab leak, circumstantial evidence. There's also a compelling case that it came from nature, because that's how most viruses get into the human population. But there was this lab that was doing research on this kind of coronavirus, one of 3 places in the world, and that was the reaction of many intelligence officials right away. Oh, what a coincidence that this happened right near this lab in China. And then they started covering things up. Like there were apparently some people that fell ill at that lab in the fall before the pandemic outbreak. No one from the U.S. government has ever been able to interview those people. I mean, there's a lot of questions, but at the same time, there have been scientific papers written that say, no, I'm sorry, this definitely came from animals. It came from that animal market. Remember, there was an animal market in Wuhan where wild animals were being sold. But they have not found any animal that transmitted the coronavirus, COVID, directly to humans.
And why this is so important is because it gets to the central question of this pandemic that killed hundreds of thousands of people in this country alone, millions of people around the world, right? Deadly, horrific, generational changing pandemic.
Yep.
How did it start?
Exactly.
This is the question they're trying to answer. And even though Chris Wray is coming out tonight, head of the FBI, and saying, here's what we think, what you're saying is the context is we got to take this all, looking at the big picture, grain of salt, et cetera.
And what many of my sources say is we may never know the answer to this, but also it's not necessarily, look, we can act as if both things are true, because there are certain steps that need to be taken, both on lab security and then on hunting for viruses in the wild.
Come back, talk more with us about this once we see the rest of the interview, which is going to air, I know, later on Fox. Ken Delaney, thank you so much. I know you've got to get now tasked for your many other jobs now that this news is broken. Appreciate it. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southern Bureau, rapper Kodak Black in Florida courtroom today after that arrest warrant issued against him for allegedly failing a drug test by testing positive for fentanyl. He's been out on bail in a drug case, and today Black's attorney says there may have been a mix-up with the failed test. The judge is going to let him go to a drug treatment program for 30 days as part of his pretrial release. From our Northeast Bureau, the sign on Jackie Robinson Parkway is out of here after drivers spotted that, look at that, that is a blatant misspelling. You don't spell Jackie J-A-K-I-E. Transportation officials replaced the sign pretty quickly. Let's hope they turn spell check back on. Not that. From our Western Bureau, some high school kids out in California, students, I should say, are building a 175-foot-long charcuterie board. It would be a world record. They're planning to load up the charcuterie board with donated food that'll then be given to local shelters. Let me tell you the damage that I could do to a 175-foot charcuterie board. It's real. Still to come here on the show. Has the NFL finally had enough of Dan Snyder? We're breaking down the new allegations being made against the Washington Commanders owner and how his private jet is caught in the middle. That's next. The walls may be closing in on the owner of the Washington Commanders, Dan Snyder, who's reportedly telling his fellow billionaire NFL owners, do what I say or you're stuck with me for good. Why do they want him to sell the team? There's reports like this from ESPN revealing today that federal prosecutors are looking at a $55 million loan that Snyder may have gotten illegally without the approval of his former minority partners. They're citing documents that accuse him of using the team as his personal piggy bank. And one of the most just eyeball-popping allegations here is that he leased his own jets to the Commanders, but then made the team pay him $4.5 million to have the Washington logo put on it. Again, giving his jet to his own team and then making them pay him. According to the Washington Post, owners are getting kind of fed up with all of this Snyder behavior here. He's allegedly threatening to sue the NFL if it doesn't pay for his legal fees and liability, according to 2 people with direct knowledge of the league. The Commanders did not return NBC News requests for comment on these stories. Mike Wise covered Snyder and the Commanders for years with the Washington Post. Quite the beat, Mike. He is joining us now live. All of these allegations on Snyder, right? The accusations of sexual harassment are what got this ball rolling against this high-profile NFL owner. But now you have some serious allegations on the potential financial crimes.
You can't make this up, Hallie. He's hit a new low, a new bottom. You talk about depravity. You talk about some of the things that he's done to alienate his fan base, and a team that really, even though it's owned by him, feels like a civic trust in Washington. I feel like, though, this is the end, and this is why. You can't take out a $55 million credit line without talking to your minority partners at the time, which apparently he didn't, according to Don Van Natta's reporting in ESPN. If this is true, and these allegations come to light during a federal investigation, Dan Snyder is not going to be looking at just having to sell the team. He could be looking at some serious white-collar crime.
And that's what this is, right? It's did this cross a line from just into what you're talking about, the potential for criminality. You talk about these allegations that are coming out of this ESPN report that the NFL did not investigate the allegations that Snyder got this loan without consulting with his minority partners. There is a statement we have to NBC News here. The NFL said a mediator helped them reach an agreement that led those partners to sell the team. But big picture here, Mike, all of this, right? All things Snyder, how much of a headache is this getting to be for the league when you have eager potential buyers that could be out there, like perhaps Jeff Bezos, Amazon founder, who might be waiting in the wings?
And it's funny because the Washington Post reported the other day that out of spite alone, because of the Post coverage of Snyder, that Bezos has not had his phone calls returned and any of his bids accepted. The most interesting thing, part of this to me, is that the NFL used to treat Dan Snyder as the little annoying brother who would just tag along and you'd be sick of for a while and put him in the corner. Now he's leapfrogged that, and he's become a real nuisance to the league. And if 3/4 of the owners have to vote to get him out, and if there's any problem getting that number before, I think the fact that Roger Goodell signed off on this credit line and has angered the owners, I think that this is the end for Dan Snyder. If he's not walking the plank now, he never will be. And, I don't want to laugh about it, but I think it's a good day for a lot of Washingtonians who feel very invested in that team and have wanted him out for a long time.
Mike Wise, thank you for coming on with us, talking about this story that, as you say, always a new twist. That does it for this hour. More for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place. I'll see you then. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.